Welcome back to the Something in the Wilderness podcast. This podcast is dedicated to all of Andrew McMahon's music. My name's Steve, and we're continuing our SoCo summer here on the podcast, talking about another oldie but well-loved track. We brought back a returning guest for this episode. Steve and I discussed Space back in January, so after this episode, if you'd like to go back and hear what we had to say about that one, go back and give it a listen. We actually even made some predictions about what would happen this year with Something Corporate, some of which were right, some of which were not, but it was kind of fun to go back and listen to that recently, actually. But this time we're going back even further in the catalog, believe it or not. So, Steve, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve.
Steve's from the Concert Pipeline podcast, and he had a pretty amazing opportunity recently, which we'll get to in a moment. But Steve, you went to the Seattle Something Corporate show over the weekend, so we actually get to talk about not only a song today, but also kind of your take on the show.
Yeah, it was an exciting show. I look forward to chatting about it.
But Seattle's quite a hike for you, right? You're in California?
Yeah, it was kind of spur of the moment a little bit. I mean, it wasn't last minute or anything, but when tickets were going on sale, I have a friend who lives in Seattle, and I talked to him about visiting him sometime this summer around that time. And so I decided, you know what? Let's do this. I don't want to wait till October to see Something Corporate in Seattle. I mean, in San Francisco, which I will see them there as well. Yeah, but so I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go up to Seattle, and it was a 24-hour round trip, adventure, and it was absolutely worth it.
I think some people look at a map and assume that Seattle is pretty close to California, but it's not close, is it?
No, but the plane flight was actually very low drama. I mean, it was the Sacramento airport is easy, so it was really simple to get there. And the only challenge was getting back. Was up in the air due to the IT stuff that was happening and flights being grounded. And I wasn't sure. I got a text while I was in Seattle that there might be challenges with my flight, and luckily there were not. So all worked according to plan.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. So before the concert, though, on Saturday, you had a pretty special opportunity with the band.
I did. So I like to make trips fully worthwhile. Not that it wouldn't have been just to see the concert, but I originally planned to go just for the concert, and I'm like, you know what? It's been like a year since I've interviewed Andrew, and so let me reach out and see if they're available for an interview. I will tell you, Steve, that generally I don't get interviews with Andrew in San Francisco because he has family in the area. So I don't ask often. He's usually pretty busy in the city. So I've interviewed him in Wisconsin and and now Seattle, different states outside to just have a chance to chat, and got the chance to chat with Andrew and Josh Partington.
That's awesome, and we will be referencing some of the audio that you brought back with you. So I got to say, of all the guests I've ever had, I've had some awesome guests. I've never had anybody bring audio to an episode, so I'm excited for people to hear that. And in fact, I want everybody to know that while this episode's dropping on Sunday, so you might be listening to it Sunday or you might be listening to it afterward, but Steve's episode of Concert Pipeline's dropping the very next morning. So chances are likely that it's already out. So check out Concert Pipeline podcast and listen to his full interview where you get a couple clips here. So
yeah, thanks for the plug. And it was absolutely a good interview. We got to the venue. It was at Merrimore Park outside of Seattle in Redmond. Mm-hmm. And we got there about half an hour before the interview, and Andrew and the band were sound checking. He was walking through what would be the crowd area, testing the microphone, and then he walked right by me, said, "Hey, buddy," and then went back to the sound check and came over and talked to me afterwards. And we were only supposed to have 15 to 20 minutes to do the interview, and he said they needed to go get something to eat, and he said, "How about if after we eat, we do 20 to 30?" And I'm like, "Okay, sold." And then it ended up being like almost 45 minutes, just total chill chat. Really one of the better interviews that we've had.
It really looked like it. It looked like just a couple of friends, a group of friends shooting the breeze. So that was awesome. And it looked like you were in somebody's backyard because you showed me a video clip.
It did have a backyardy feel. And but it was behind the venue. It was
Okay.
yeah, it was off backstage, but it was like a side area that was, I guess, where the band can hang and everything. There was cornhole off to the side, and
Yeah.
there was a hammock. I think you saw in the clip there was a hammock. When
Yeah.
I got up there, Andrew and Josh were sitting there. I was like, okay, I'll take the hammock. They completely relaxed in this interview or something, right? But I didn't.
Will that video be on YouTube, or are we just gonna get the audio?
Yeah, we put most of our shows on YouTube as well. Since COVID hit, I've started doing Zoom for all my interviews, and I use the video from them as well. And so it's on YouTube, Spotify, and
Excellent.
Apple Music.
Awesome. Oh, I can't wait to watch the whole thing. So, like I said, so I think that's what kind of contributed to my feeling that it was like three guys just chilling, because it looked like you were in somebody's at a backyard barbecue or something.
It had that feel, and it
Yeah.
wasn't too hot, which is good. It was definitely a lot cooler than it is here in California.
Well, the song we're discussing today was written by a high school freshman. So it was recorded over 25 years ago, written even longer ago than that. And it's a track that's recently made its way back onto the set list this past year. But before December 2023, I don't think it had been performed in over 20 years. Steve, I'm going to admit out the gate that I don't have a long history with this song. This is one of those that I didn't discover until basically the pandemic, when those live streams started and when I decided to do a podcast about Andrew's music. And one of my very first guests sent me the individual MP3s of Ready Break. And for whatever reason it's just Napster and LimeWire and those things back in the day, you didn't know what you were getting. You didn't know if you had the complete set. I never thought to look up the track list. So this was missing out of that collection over 20 years ago, and somebody helped me out back in 2020. And the other one I didn't hear before was Inside the Pocket. So Babies of the 80s and Inside the Pocket are pretty new songs for me. And today we're talking about Babies of the 80s.
What are your thoughts initially? Just, I mean, with this being such an old song and such a youthful version of Andrew, like hearing it so much later after so much other of his music and music projects, what is your initial take on it?
Initial take, all honesty, jarring. It's jarring to me. It's so different from what I'm used to.
Yeah.
From Something Corporate in particular, Andrew McMahon as a whole. Yeah, it's not what I would have expected, even coming off that album, so to speak. I know they called it a demo album, Ready Break, but it's not what I expected to hear. There's not much that sounds a whole lot like it, although arguably Inside the Pocket might be the other one that kind of has a similar sound to it. Yeah, it was different. I was I'll wait for details. I'll wait on the details because on what I like about it and that sort of thing. But yeah, I like I said, I didn't get these MP3s until 4 years ago. And yes, everybody, I'm still swapping MP3s in the modern era between fans. So it's fun. It kind of reminds me of the good old days. We don't necessarily do it through any kind of software anymore. It's just like, oh, you have that. Like Steve last time, I was like, you have Live at the Fillmore? I've never actually listened through it. He's like, here it is. So
I had to find a CD player or CD burner, to do it. Like my daughter's computer iMac is ancient and actually has
that's
one.
wild.
So I was able to upload it to you for you. But yeah,
Thanks.
I know I don't have much of a way to play CDs, even though I have hundreds of them still.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
Yeah, interestingly, I know a lot of the stuff is out on YouTube, but for whatever, not until like the last couple of years have I really thought to go out to YouTube and look for this stuff. Sure,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can get Live at the Fillmore out on YouTube, and and I know you can get Babies of the 80s and Inside the Pocket out on YouTube, but I just never thought to look for it on YouTube. I just don't consume music that way, typically,
Yeah.
unless I'm sitting at a desktop computer with a second monitor that I can have it up on.
There are physical copies on eBay actually of Live at the Fillmore.
I did. Yeah, I did see. Yeah, you sent me a message afterward, and I remember in the last episode we talked, I was like, oh, that's another one of those like Ready Break that people are charging a lot for. But apparently, no, you can get it for a normal CD price, used price.
Yeah.
So actually, that's one of the very few Andrew CDs I don't have. So I guess I better snatch it up before it is rare. So the first place this song that we're talking about ever appeared was on the Andrew McMahon EP from 1999. Have you heard of this? Are you familiar with this?
I am aware of its existence, and I think I've seen the cover of it,
Yeah.
like a little kid picture of him, if I remember correctly, but
Right.
but I've never heard it. I don't know. I don't have a copy of it, and I wasn't a fan yet. In
Yeah, right,
1999.
right. Who was an
So,
Andrew? Who nationally was paying attention to Andrew McMahon in 1999 in terms of his music? But it contains "Airports" is track 1, "Babes of the '80s" is track 2, "Spin" is track 3, and then "Drunk Girl" is track 4. So these have to be the oldest Andrew McMahon songs there are, evidently. And it's also interesting to me that out of those 4 songs, only 3 were ever reused for future something corporate releases. Spin was lost to time, and that is one that I had in my MP3s, and I never knew where that came from until, again, just the last couple of years. It's on the Andrew McMahon EP. It's on Ready Break as track 6, which came out just over a year later. So you had Andrew McMahon EP on July 1st, 1999, Ready Break in the fall of 2000. How did you find out about this song, though? Like, when did it come? When did it find you?
I found out about it through Ready Break,
Oh, that's right.
which
You have that. You own that CD. You're showing it to me right now.
actually I have. I don't know if you know that this exists as an Andrew McMahon fan, but there was a second printing of Ready Break. This was for fans in his fan club that he had in '04, the fan club with a K, and he sent out signed copies of Ready Break. So yeah, I found out about it through Ready Break. Although I mean, I may have shared this on the pod last time, but I never opened Ready Break until I interviewed Andrew for the first time in '04, and I opened it right in front of him, and he's like,
Hmm.
"How do you get this sort of thing?" And again, back to eBay, but I think it was $81 or something along those lines, but worth a lot more now. But
Yeah. It's up towards. I think it was 475 when I looked a year or two ago. I don't know if it still is.
mine would not get that much because it is signed to me.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, that's I had the tracks from it, or a friend had burned it for me. So I was listening to Ready Break after I got into Leaving Through the Window and everything like that. I went back and became a fan of that album and some of the songs on it as well. So
Yeah, I'm willing to bet there's a lot of Andrew McMahon and even some something corporate fans that haven't listened to all of Ready Break like myself. At least I'd like to think I'm not the only one who somehow missed some of these songs. But I think if we know it, the main reason we know Ready Break is the very first place Constantine was ever released. So
yes.
which is obviously a big one in the fan base. You first heard it on Ready Break. Did you hear it live in concert back then, or was that one that you didn't think you'd ever hear it, right?
No, from what I saw, he never played it after 2002,
Hmm.
and the first time I saw him was January 2003. So,
Gotcha.
so I never saw it live. He says they played it in the early days of Something Corporate, but I imagine that means earlier than than when I saw him. We talked about it in the clip that you have as well. But
You never really played it live though until now, right? Like, I mean, it never came out since we used to play it all. I mean, and I mean, something corporate used to play it all the time in the early days. I think again the beauty of this moment is actually being able to like look back on the things that in sort of the middle stage of being in this band, where all of a sudden concepts of like style and being cool and how we and how we perceived ourselves or wanted people to perceive us, especially feeling like we were always like a rock or a pop band, but like thrust into like a punk and hardcore and sort of emo world. We always were. I think we got into a place sometimes maybe almost too much in our heads where we were really trying to like massage the perception of who we were, to the point where like bringing out a song like Babies of the '80s at that point, I think maybe would have pushed up against how we wanted the world to perceive us in that moment. Whereas now it's kind of like, fuck it,
Let's do it.
it's funny.
Yeah.
Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, it's a part of who we are. And this is about the whole picture. We're not over here trying to be like, no, we're Radiohead. We're like, no, we're this band, Something Corporate, that has this like weird connection to all of these different scenes and eras of music somehow. And we're still here and people are still coming. Like, why not give them the peek behind the curtain of like, this is actually how we became who we are. Whether it's like our favorite song, it's still kind of like a moment where when that video plays, I'm like, whatever it is, this is a fun multimedia piece.
So there's no music video for this song, but there are visuals that you got to see in Anaheim last December, right?
Yeah, they did a whole visual package for this song with a lot of the things that are in the song, and I should have gone back and watched it beforehand because I'm pretty sure I recorded this song from the Anaheim show as well. I just remember like when they were starting Babies of the '80s, yeah, I was just like floored, you know. I mean,
Uh-huh.
because I'd never seen him play it live, and it was one of those. It's on the short list of songs that I'm like, I want to hear some of the deep cuts that that go way back
Right.
that they don't play, and they delivered that. And so I expected them to play it up in Seattle also, and even mentioned as much to Andrew. I was like, I think this is in your set, and I didn't spoil the set list from the night before
Hmm.
or the other shows because I was trying to
Right.
keep it as fresh as possible, even though I know they're going to play most everything.
Yeah.
And they did not play it in Seattle. They didn't use that package that they had built for it.
Right. Yeah. They seem to be alternating a couple of deep cuts right now in the set list. So as I mentioned, we messaged a few times back and forth before we recorded today. And I said, I'm not as worried about set lists right now that I usually am. Now, other people might be, to be fair, just because I'm seeing them in September, and that's a heck of a long time to wait to avoid set lists. There's just no
Yeah.
way. I did see them last month at a festival show, but I pretty much could predict what they were going to play there, and I was
Yeah.
mostly right. There was a couple of surprises. I'm kind of like, if I see a set list, I'm not going to get all bent out of shape about it. Whereas on the New Friends tour, I was like, for like 10 days straight, I was like, I can't look at set lists. I can't look at set lists.
Nope. Yeah, you're very just like blinders to it.
Yeah. So again, there's no music video for the song, but I did find it funny. If you search on YouTube "Babies of the '80s" without any context, just those words, what you get is a group of college girls who made a music video, which I thought was funny because my friends and I used to do that in high school and college. We'd
Yeah.
basically record random footage and then set music to it, as well as make fake commercials and short films and things like that that were just basically only for our eyes and to laugh about with friends. Shout out to the girls who somehow are the first in the search for Babies of the '80s and made a music video, and I'm sure they cringe at it when they see it, but I guess there's got to be some kind of pride to that too, that so many people have watched it. But yeah, anyway, it's set to obviously something corporate's Babies of the '80s, and they reenact what is happening in the lyrics, I guess. So I thought that was funny, and it just kind of reminded me of my childhood, or I guess my young adulthood. My friend and I made a music video for Soul Asylum's "Runaway Train." Are you familiar with that song?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that video is long lost to time, and I am glad that's not available for YouTube. So
I've done similar things. So I can't deny that. I mean, I've been doing video projects since I was 14 or
yep.
earlier, like public access TV shows and stuff. And there's a lot of stuff in boxes, and there I have stuff that would fall into that category.
I wish I still had some of that stuff, and I do. I have seen one of them recently, but most of it, I'm like, yeah, it's probably best that's never on YouTube. I'm cool with that, in my current state in life.
Yeah.
So according to Genius.com, the Ready Break version of this track was produced by Craig Black and Andrew. Now, I mentioned this on the Kavanaugh Park episode as well, because Kavanaugh Park was originally on Ready Break. I'm not sure if Craig was just a friend of theirs or if he was a guy that worked at the Galaxy Theater that recorded their early stuff. Do you know anything about this Craig Black? Have you ever heard that name?
I'm not familiar with the name. No.
If you look him up in terms of a producer credit, it's the only thing I think he has to his name that I can find. But I mean, the name is kind of common, so a lot of
Yeah.
stuff comes up for a Craig Black. So I don't know. Now, I assume that Ruben Hernandez played guitar on this track. I have to assume along with Josh, right? Because
Probably fair. Yeah.
because William wasn't in the band yet. What I don't know, and going back to that EP again for just a moment, I have to assume for that EP that those were the guys in Something Corporate playing the instruments.
Right. Who else is he playing with on his EP? That
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Andrew
and
doesn't
it's
play
so
anything but
close.
piano.
You sent me the two versions, and I'm just like, they're 20 seconds difference in length, but I'm like at a loss for kind of identifying. I mean, actually the original, the Andrew McMahon EP one sounds more crisp, I think, even than the Something Corporate one.
I felt the opposite. I felt like the technical quality was a little bit better on the second version, on the Ready Break version, and that the volume of the instruments were tweaked a little bit. I think it's the same demo with remastering or tweaking, whatever you want to call it. So
Feels like it, yeah.
yeah, I think it's the same actually. But yeah, that's why I assume the guys from Something Corporate played on it. I just don't know why it was called the Andrew McMahon EP. That's kind of fascinating to me, and that I might put that on my list of questions I'd ask Andrew if I ever, had a moment again to chat with him. So I don't know if it was like a promotional thing before Something Corporate put out their first demo or what. Because again, 3 of the songs are the same that they used later on. And again, they're all full band songs, so I have to believe that Ruben and Josh and Clutch and Brian are all on this track. So that's my best guess.
I wonder how many copies they printed too. Like, it doesn't feel like there are many of those floating around either.
No, it does not. Most people do not have one. So I don't know anything else, obviously, about the production on this song. I don't know where it was recorded. I mean, heck, that might be in the liner notes of Ready Break, and I don't have that, obviously. But yeah, so that's really all I have for that. Let's talk more about this song live and about the live show in general. So according to Setlist FM, now this can't be accurate, and we know this from Andrew's own words, but Setlist FM lists this song being played 8 times total in the history of Something Corporate. That can't be accurate. He did say in your interview that he played it. They used to play it all the time in the early days, and then they stopped. But but 5 of them, I can confirm that 5 times that it's been played have been since December. So that's pretty incredible that they've played it that many times between the New York and Philly shows, and then the most recently, and then Anaheim, of course. I think they played it both nights in Anaheim, if I remember correctly. We gotta assume and expect that there's a lot of undocumented times that this has been played in the early days of Something Corporate. All those early shows, club shows, backyard shows, basement shows, when they're banging out this song in front of people, was not recorded. So Steve, I think we got a little bit of the answer from Andrew, but in your own words, why the revival of this song, you think? After all this time, they bring this song back to the set list.
Yeah, I think they're just having fun. They've heard loud and clear what the fans want, and it's first of all to get for them to be on stage together, but also to pull out some of the deeper cuts. I mean, Andrew and I talked about it a little bit. There was a podcast he was on a couple months back, a business leadership podcast, and he really said this tour is for the fans that he's doing, and so they're digging out. I mean, it's for them to get back together and hang out with his friends, but also to do what the fans want, really. And so they're like, okay, we'll try these songs that we wouldn't even attempt beforehand. Okay, we had stopped playing UC Jordan because that's more of a high school song. Mm-hmm. Of course, we'll pull that out because that's a fan favorite. And some of these deeper songs. And one thing you'll hear in the interview that I did with him also, after we talked about this song, I kind of poked to the idea of pulling out Ben Franklin's Kite.
Oh, really?
For San Francisco, he said they might be able to do it though. So we'll see if that comes around too. So.
Wow, dropping the info here. That's awesome. I've heard him mention different deep cuts and we're going to try to get to it. I mean, spoiler alert on the set list. If you don't want to know, I'm going to drop another one that's been in the set recently, but Little, I know, has been in the set, which is exciting for a lot of people. Again, one of those that we never expected we would hear again, because Andrew didn't play it all through Jack's Mannequin in the Wilderness years, and suddenly we have this opportunity again to hear these songs we haven't heard before on stage. So
it's true, and I think that this is just a fun song. Like it's not deep lyrics, really. it's just. It's just a fun song, and so they pull it out. They want to have some fun.
Definitely, yeah, I like that. So speaking of this song live and the visuals that we talked about earlier, I do have a link, and I'll post it in the show notes. It's a pretty direct barricade shot of the visuals. I'll post the link. My friend Tyler took that video in Anaheim one of the nights. It's really nice because you get a very clear picture of all the video they used. Again, this is one that we just never thought we'd hear live. When I first heard it 4 years ago, I was like, well, that's an interesting song, but that's not one that he's going to pull out. In your interview, he did talk about the songwriting a little bit, which I thought was really cool. Thank you so much for asking him that.
Look, I mean, I don't think there's any question that I grew up a Billy Joel fanatic. So I think probably somewhere in my brain I was trying to intone some of like the "we didn't start the fires," sort of unpacking the, albeit a much shorter window of life and its relationship to politics and popular culture into a song. I think I was probably a freshman in high school when I wrote it. You know, I think a lot of those early songs were, you know, informed by like my affinity for Billy Joel. Maybe by that point Ben Folds and Ben Folds 5 had worked their way into the mix, possibly, like, but like some of those, like, you know, Weezer and maybe, you know, some of those sort of like earlier kind of more catty tongue-in-cheek records, I think it kind of started ending up in my CD player, as the case might have been back then. And yeah, so it was just like a deep dive on trying to find every object and event that I kind of remember shaping me and my sister, who's maybe a year older than I am, like as we kind of came up into the world. And it was like one of those songs that, like a lot of that music in that stage, like my outlet for music wasn't really a band yet. It was playing songs in the Porthole Theater in Dana Hills or in the choir room for other drama nerds like myself. Like that was my outlet for songwriting. So it was like if I could write something that was kind of funny and catchy, and then I could drop that into the chat, so to speak, in lunchtime or between classes during high school, like that's how I got like noticed and made friends and got attention. And like that was very much in that category of songs. Like that was like one of the earliest ones. There's a song called Airports that was kind of maybe a year later. So there's like a handful of these tunes that were sort of workshopped in the various like theater nerd spaces that I inhabited as a 14 and 15-year-old kid in high school.
This song seems to predate something corporate. I'm not sure on that, but he did say he wrote it as a freshman, high school freshman.
He was young.
Yeah, that's super young. And he also referenced Airports as another one that was written around the same time. And I had heard him say that he wrote that when he was 14 or 15 before. But then in your interview, he confirmed that he wrote this one when he was about the same age. But I do like the fun vibe of this song. Like I said, it's different. It harkens back to his childhood. What I find funny, though, is we look back at this like, oh, the 80s, you know, way back in the 80s. This song was written, about 8 years after the 80s ended.
So it's like 8 or something, yeah.
But I guess when you're 15 years old, time seems so, you know, that seems like such a long time ago, right? That's half your life ago that you were, quote unquote, a kid. I mean, my daughter, who's not even 13 yet, she references back when she was young and when she was a kid. I'm like, you're still a kid, but that's okay.
They think they're grown-ups and they got all the answers and everything.
No, I remember feeling that way. So I think most of us did or do or whatever. Yeah, the 80s references definitely bring back the nostalgia. So even though I didn't know the song back in 2000 and 2002 when they were touring so heavily, I can definitely relate to so much. And I'm looking forward to getting into the actual lyrics in a little bit here and talking through all these references from our childhoods. But I found it kind of interesting to hear him talk so candidly, and it kind of made me think of high school, of my own experience. Because I was friends with a lot of guys in bands, go to the coffee shop on weekends where they'd play, or at the VFW hall. So I kind of imagined this picture. He was saying that basically when he wrote the song, it was like to entertain his friends, like funny references from their childhood, some political and historical thing, you know, events thrown in there as well for good measure. And I found that really cool, just imagining them like sitting around. He was like to entertain the nerdy theater kids is how he put it in your interview, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought of kids sitting around like how we used to hang out in the hallway and just talk about whatever, about music or whatever. And again, related to kind of that, what things looked like in his school, and probably not too much different, you know, growing up in the same era. So
I think he said at the concert that Brian Ireland was in theater with him.
That sounds familiar. Again, I'll go back to, I find it funny that, you know, he was way back in the 80s, you know, we're talking about all these references. It was not that long before that, you know, to teenagers, it is. I do want to talk about those lyrical references. We'll come back to that. But first, I want to point out another song. I sent you a song that, and you, I think you understood right away why I sent this song to you. It's not by Andrew. It's not by something corporate. It's a song called Unbelievable by Owl City featuring Hanson. So to catch everyone else up that's listening, this song by Owl City was off of an album called Mobile Orchestra, released about, I think, 9 years ago or so. So I feel like it's part of the same world, or they're sort of connected, since Adam Young of Owl City did a remix of I Woke Up in a Car. But as far as I know, that's the only connection between those two artists. I don't think there's any direct relation between Hanson and Andrew McMahon necessarily, but I have met a lot of Andrew fans that are really big Hanson fans as well. I didn't know that was a thing until I started doing this podcast. Yes, it's a thing. So there seems to be a lot of crossover in their fan bases. So I thought, this is doubly why this song may or may not be relevant. Anyway, I brought this song up to Steve. I sent it to him because it has a lot of 80s and early 90s references. It's just basically one of those songs that rattles off a bunch of references from conceivably our childhoods, for a lot of us. So what did you think of the song?
It's not bad. I wasn't aware of it, but I would say I resonate more with the lyrics in "Unbelievable" than in "Babies of the '80s." Even some of the things in "Babies of the '80s" I had to look up because I didn't know what "Five Alive" was, for example, and I know.
Oh, I still don't. I still don't. So I'm hoping you're going to tell me.
I'll share the news.
Okay.
Yeah, but a lot in "Unbelievable." Yeah, pieces of my childhood. Yeah, of course. Slip and Slides are in both songs, referenced in both songs.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Let's see. Etch a Sketch, Pogs. I played with Pogs a lot as a kid. Berenstain Bears, of course. Like, there's a lot of G.I. Joes. There's a lot of references in here that are.
Yeah, there's a Star Wars reference in this one too, a different Star Wars reference, but yeah, it's just I think the one I related to most in anything in the song is blowing on Nintendo games. Like,
yes,
I don't know if you played the original Nintendo where you had to blow in the cartridge to sometimes make it work.
Yeah,
and obviously VHS. I didn't know. I had to look this up. I didn't know Dr. Pepper jelly beans were around in the 80s. Like, I thought that was a newer thing. Like, when I was an adult.
That's Jelly Bellies, right?
Or Jelly Belly brand. Yes, Jelly Bellies.
So I even now live 5 minutes from the Jelly Belly factory.
Oh my gosh!
And so I grew up and I'd been to the Jelly Belly factory a number of times, and they have tours. And I remember as a kid, like, getting this big rollout poster of the Jelly Belly factory and all these little Jelly Belly characters doing the different jobs and doing wacky things within the factory. And you can color it in and everything. Yeah, I was aware of Dr. Pepper jelly beans, and they have popcorn flavors and all these other flavors of Jelly Bellies. But yeah, been there a bunch of times taking my kids to the factory, and I'm
sure Jelly Belly was wide open to school field trips and advertising to all the youth of the area, like, hey, come see how Jelly Bellies are made, and you're gonna want Jelly Bellies forever now. So they are pretty tasty.
They have these cool things, Steve. They have called belly flops, and I'm sure you might not be familiar, but
no,
it's the duds. So it's like 3 or 4 jelly beans stuck to like a 2 or 5 pound bag of duds that are like discounted, that you can get from the factory. So
oh, I love it. I want some belly flops. Oh my god! And I love the name, by the way. That's hilarious, actually.
Yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, but there's a lot of great references. It gets into the early 90s, but Hanson were younger. I mean, the youngest kid was 11 in 1997 when they hit it big. So, but yeah, so there's a lot of early 90s references like Jurassic Park, and I can't remember the other one. But I thought it was neat. It kind of, even though there's no direct connection to Babies of the 80s, I felt like maybe it was a spiritual sequel. Like, maybe Adam Young was like, hey, I like that idea. I want to write my own. I'd like to think that. Adam Young may beg to disagree, that he was inspired by Babies of the 80s.
I feel like they're both kind of, and Andrew said this in the clip, it's very widely known he's a big Billy Joel fan. And so this is kind of his take. And I found this in the research even before interviewing him, but he confirmed it. We didn't start the fire. This is their version of We Didn't Start the Fire, really. And I kind of think Owl Cities is kind of taking on that as well. So it's kind of in the same vein of throw a lot of things in a blender and let it land and kind of, and try and remember it all when you're singing it, I guess. I don't know.
I think that's a really good point you make, that you're taking a bunch of things that remind you of a certain era or are nostalgic, for your childhood or throughout history in the case of Billy Joel's song, and you're throwing it all together, but you also have to make it rhyme or put a melody to it, right? So it can't necessarily all be in exact order, although I think Billy Joel may have pulled that part off. And so it's it's kind of putting all these references together at the same time. So speaking of which, let's talk about the sound of the song, because I did want to bring up that Billy Joel reference he made. I would have never made that connection, but after I listened to your interview clip, I listened to the song again, and I was like, holy crap. Yeah, I completely get it. It was his attempt at like a rockin' Billy. Now goofier lyrics. I don't know that Billy Joel has too much in the vein of goofier lyrics. It was kind of like that, banging on a piano and just really having fun. And obviously Andrew's been inspired by that his whole life. So
yeah, and later got to open for Billy Joel multiple times.
Yeah, life goal achieved right there.
Yeah.
He said in your interview other artists that he was really into that kind of had goofy songs like Weezer, and I loved hearing that. I mean, you've heard me say it before, I'm sure. Huge Weezer fan, one of my favorite bands in the world, and have been since 1994. And I love hearing when the artists that I love the other artists that I love. And I know he's referenced Weezer before. This isn't a shocker to me, but it was neat to hear him directly reference a band that I was listening to at the same time he was, and say that partially inspired me to write the song. Weezer has some ridiculous lyrics. Like it's something that's kind of a joke in the Weezer fan base. You go all the way back to Buddy Holly in the Sweater Song, right?
Yeah,
some of their
Sweater
most
Song,
famous songs have the most ridiculous lyrics to them and don't make any sense. Beverly Hills, even, which is a lot further up. Now, when Weezer releases a song and it's kind of silly lyrics, people are like, "Oh, they've gotten so goofy." I'm like, "Well, they were always very goofy. They haven't really changed in that vein." So,
are you going to the Blue Album tour? Or
yes, I am. I'm seeing so. Oddly, and I don't have many concerts on my list right now besides what I'm going to this week, but I am going to. The same month I'm going to Something Corporate in September, I also have a ticket to Weezer. So I'm actually going to 3 concerts that month, Something Corporate being 2 of them and Weezer being the other. So very excited. I am shocked they sold out Nationwide Arena in Columbus as quickly as they did. I did not know in 2024 Weezer could sell out a hockey arena. I'm still kind of shocked about it.
I mean, it kind of speaks to the power of nostalgia also, which is another theme. And, again, going back to my interview with Andrew, we talk about nostalgia. I'll just give you everything from the interview. But it's, I mean, Something Corporate being back is a nostalgia feel, right? I mean, it's like Yellow Card is selling out and playing shows bigger than they played when they were relevant. I mean, back 20 years ago.
Right.
That's that sort of thing. I mean, people want to
love seeing that, by the way, for Yellow Card. I love it for them.
Yeah.
I listened to your Yellow Card and Third Eye Blind episode. You went to the show because I had to live vicariously through you on that one, because although I got to see them last summer, I was unable to get to a show this summer. And so when I saw you were going, and actually another former guest was at the Maryland show. That's such a good bill. Coincidentally, I saw both of those bands within a week of each other at separate shows last July of 2023, but I couldn't get to see them both in the same place this year. So they didn't come to Columbus, but I would have had to drive a few hours. But
yeah,
speaking of references of influences on this song in particular that Andrew mentioned in your interview, he also mentioned Ben Folds. Also not a shocker. Again, listening back to Babies of the 80s after I heard these, Billy Joel, Weezer, Ben Folds, I'm like, I hear it all, man. I hear it all.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of Ben Folds in this song too, for sure.
Ben Folds is probably an artist I slept on longer than I should have. I can't say I'm still that I've ever gotten deep into Ben Folds even to this day. But when I hear his music and their music as Ben Folds 5, I'm like, I don't know why I don't listen to this more often. He's a talented songwriter. I did read his book, and I would recommend people read that.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm kind of the same camp with Ben Folds. I've never seen him live, actually. But I've wanted to. It just never happened.
The beginning of this song, he says, "Red light means stop." Or do you know who says that, or you have any idea? Because I have no idea.
I don't know. I mean, is it not him?
I don't know. It could be Andrew. It could be another guy in the band. It's hard to tell. But yeah, someone yells, "Red light means stop," and then they go. They haven't done that too often in Something Corporate songs. where they talk in the beginning or whatever. It's very kind of a rare thing. Coincidentally, they have it in Death Grip in the middle.
Yes.
There's some like, it sounds like people in the studio just talking. My friend Andrew, former guest, not Andrew McMahon, a different Andrew, who's been on the show a couple of times, he pointed out to me that if you listen to Death Grip on Spotify, you can read the lyrics, but also it lists what they're actually saying in those parts, which it's just, they're just goofing around in the studio, and they kept it.
Can you send me a screenshot of that?
I actually have, I have a video of myself scrolling through it. So
I want to see that.
I will share it to you, and I'll share it on Instagram, in fact.
We did talk about that in my interview as well, that spoken part. So.
Oh, cool.
We cover it all, Steve. We go deep, okay?
Well, hey, 45 minutes is a long darn time to get to talk to an artist that you love. So that's great. I've said it before, but I'm looking forward to seeing the whole thing. Oh, I did want to talk about the sound of the song before we move on to lyrics real quick. So I was trying to think of a word to describe this when I heard it, and I told you earlier, jarring, but that's not how I would describe the sound of the music. The sound of the music I would describe as frenetic. I did look up the word to make sure that it was what I thought it was. It just keeps going. It's just busy. It just doesn't stop throughout the whole thing. Again, not a lot of Andrew's songs do that. They don't start real fast and stay fast throughout the whole song. Going back to the live show for just a moment, I think this part of the reason they play this song too, in addition to what you talked about and what Andrew mentioned, is like it definitely brings up the energy a notch with this song, because it's just a straight through rocker. The sound and style though is more punk than they usually get. For a band that says, we're not pop punk, we're not punk, this kind of sounds a little bit punk to me.
A little bit. It's probably as close as something corporate would get to.
Right,
punk
right.
Being a
to,
piano,
to be fair,
pop
yeah.
punk piano.
Pop punk piano, for sure. But that piano solo is the wildest piano solo I've ever heard from Andrew. But to my initial comment about the song, that one was a shocker. I was like, wow, that is quite that's different than the way he normally plays.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, he was obviously experimenting with a lot of different things around that time, musically, and kind of finding his voice and sound for the band. And this one was a different feel than a lot of Something Corporate songs.
Yeah, it was almost like a demonstration of what he was capable of, which is completely fair. I mean, if, like you said, you're experimenting, you're writing music, and you're showing people what you can do. It was a good way to do that, because he was able to, write a fun, creative song that people could not only sing along to, reference the lyrics, relate to the lyrics, but also like, wow, that piano playing is crazy in the middle.
Yeah.
Are you ready to talk about some lyrics?
Let's talk about some lyrics.
A lot of pop culture references here, as we alluded to a couple of times already. I'm going to read a quote from Soport.com, because I had to look this up. I was like, what the hell are Lycra shorts?
Yeah, I didn't look it up.
I've never heard of this before. From Soport.com, Lycra is a brand name for elastane, which is a highly elastic synthetic fabric. Despite having different names, Lycra, spandex, and elastane are all the same material. So when I was young, we called it spandex. I've never heard it called Lycra.
Yeah, I would have gone with spandex as well.
Okay. I was going to ask if it was a regional thing. So I thought you were going to tell me that, no, in California, we called it Lycra.
No, I wasn't familiar with the term Lycra, and I would have used the term spandex. And seeing Lycra shorts, I mean, that still, I would go with spandex, but maybe lyrically it fit better for Lycra. I mean, both are two syllables. Spandex shorts, like it sounds like it would bounce better. I don't know. I'm not the musician.
Right. Yeah, I was trying to figure that one out, and I didn't get a clear answer. So I guess the jury's out on that one. Wherever he's from, maybe his family, different people call things different things, but I guess it's the same as spandex. So I at least I have my answer on that one. What were your favorite toys growing up? So he mentioned some toys here. What did you have, like a favorite action figure or toy or something?
Around that time, I would have probably said Ninja Turtles toys. I was big on the Ninja Turtles toys, and I had this big dome, like Ninja Turtles dome, I remember.
Oh, heck yeah, I wanted that thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you include the game systems too, I mean, of course, the video game systems, the Nintendo and NES were very prevalent, before I moved into Sega and had the Genesis and the Game Gear. Yeah, I mean, those, of course, the song mentions, I think, G.I. Joes, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Transformers, GI
there's
Joes.
just, yeah, I had
Um,
those. Yeah.
so I wasn't into either Transformers or GI Joes, and I remember hanging out with friends in high school, and just like Andrew and his crew, we were hearkening back to our childhood and what we played with. And I remember someone being like, "You never played with Transformers?" I was like, "No, I don't know why. I played He-Man, which was
Yeah,
really old."
I did actually. I played more He-Man than probably G.I. Joe for sure.
Yeah, same. Yeah, and then I played with
Skeletor.
yeah, I had the
Yeah,
Skeletor guy.
yeah.
Quick story. We still bring this up like every holiday to my mom. You know, when you're a kid, you think $5 is a lot of money. Now, to be fair, $5 was more money in the 80s than it is in 2024. But I do know my mom was like, "Hey, you're this old and you don't play with your He-Man anymore. Can we sell your He-Mans in the garage sale?" Now, granted, I may have it might have been my idea. I can't put that completely on my mom. But we always joke at holidays now that she sold my He-Man guys, all of them, in a basket for $5.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I'm like looking, and it was even as early as high school, and I was like, "What did I do? I sold all my He-Man guys for $5, and
Yeah.
like Castle Grayskull is included.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
somebody got
yeah.
a killer deal on that." But I will say, based on that experience, I kept my Legos, and my younger daughter still plays with my Legos from my childhood to this day.
Nice.
I also kept the Ninja Turtles up until a point, but I will admit I sold them like 2 years ago to a
For
toy
$5.
collector. Not for $5. I got about 200 for
Wow.
that
Okay.
set. It
Okay.
was a lot. There were a lot of them in
Yeah.
vehicles and everything, and I had them in pretty good condition. So I finally got rid of them because I agreed with my wife. Like she didn't encourage it or anything. I was like, you know what? My kids are never going to play with Ninja Turtles. What am I ever going to do with these Ninja Turtles? I just need to, if someone will give me 100 or $200 for them, and somebody did.
There you go. Pay some bills with it.
Yeah, yep, that's what we did. It kind of like went away as quickly as I got it, but it is what it is. But yeah, Toys R Us. Do you remember Toys R Us?
Oh yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd go there and I mean, you'd always want everything on the shelves.
Oh, heck yeah.
I remember one particular trip to Toys R Us that was memorable. Was my sister and I got these cassette tapes which have like a happy birthday song on it, and
Hmm.
it had our name on it, and sing like a happy birthday song. I don't think it was just happy birthday. I think it was a different song, which we still kind of can find online. And I don't know, it's a piece of our childhood that is memorable. But we got those from Toys R Us.
It sings your name. Is that what you said?
I mean, I don't want to sing the song, but it has your name in the
It
song.
has your name in it. Yes, yeah, I
Yes.
remember that. I remember those. Yeah, I didn't have it, but I wasn't lucky enough to have that. But yeah, that's pretty. Yeah,
We were very well off. We got cassettes with a song with our name on. So,
yeah. You're living large. I remember Teddy Ruxpin and
yeah, I
those
had
when
that.
that
Yes, I had the
when
Teddy
that all
Ruxpin.
came out, where like the stuffed animal would talk, or
Yeah,
sing. I always remember Toys R Us is like Toys R Us is. It kind of gives me feelings of joy just to think about the sign. Because when you were young and you'd pull into the Toys R Us parking lot, you knew it was going to be a good thing. You were either going to get something for you, or you were buying a present for someone else, or like it was always a good thing if you were going to Toys R Us. It was never a bad thing.
yeah, always a good time. Yeah.
Yeah,
You wanted to know what Five Alive is because the first lyric is "I grew up on Five Alive," and
yeah.
for
I had no I didn't even catch that one. I guess I didn't even know what that. I missed that completely because I didn't know what that was. I guess.
and so I googled it right before and we chatted, and
Nice.
it's like a citrus drink. It looks like Tang or something. Doesn't look good at all, but Tang or Sunny D or something along those lines. Yeah,
Ooh,
I never had it.
if anybody knows where we can get some of that stuff, yeah.
Apparently, certain places it's rare, but it's still available. Some places I don't know,
Uh-huh.
but
I worked at Chuck E. Cheese when I was young.
you did. Okay,
Did you guys have Chuck E. Cheese where you grew up?
you did. Yes,
Okay. Did you have Showbiz Pizza?
that's their pizza. Is that just what their pizza's called? Or-
When I was young, there were Showbiz and there were Chuck E. Cheese, and then Showbiz bought Chuck E. Cheese and then kept the Chuck E. Cheese name is what
I
happened.
was I wasn't familiar with Showbiz.
And I know this because I worked there, so I kind of got a little bit of the company history there. I've worked at Chuck E. Cheese not only once, not twice, 6 times in my life.
Wow. Okay.
I have a different relationship with the company Chuck E. Cheese than most people do. Most people look at this in the lyrics and like, oh yeah, that was the fun place we went when I was a kid. That's the place where I worked in high school and I made pizzas, and then I was a manager after college. And basically whenever I needed a job, I went back to Chuck E. Cheese, and I'm like, I have all this experience, and and they would give me a job.
The rat will take me back, right?
Always. I've worked in 3 different states, Chuck E. Cheese's. Just like as I've moved around, again, if I needed a job, I was like, I went there and they gave me a job. So I got to give Chuck E. Cheese Corporation credit for that. I'd never want to work there again, but I hope I never have to go back. I will say that too. I did get to dress as the mouse plenty of times. One time in college, my friend wanted to celebrate his 21st birthday at Chuck E. Cheese's. And again, this is kind of in between the times I worked there. I wasn't working there at the time. It wasn't even one of the stores I ever worked at. And we got there, and I actually asked the hostess who hosts the birthday parties, I was like, hey, could I get in the suit and dance for my friend's party? And she let me.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't even work there at the time. I was like, oh, thanks. I have a different, like when I see the words Chuck E. Cheese and hear the words Chuck E. Cheese, those are the things that I think of.
And now they took away all the animatronics, that like all of them except maybe 1 or 2 or something, because of Five Nights at Freddy's and what have you. So.
Well, they're very expensive to maintain. So those things, they had a full-time maintenance guy that would just work on those things. So they're very expensive. So probably a good financial decision.
Yeah.
80s music reference here. Disco's out, techno's in, or disco out and techno in. Are you a fan of 80s music?
Yeah. I mean, 2001, I actually interned at an 80s radio station in San Francisco.
Oh, nice.
So I was inundated with 80s music. It was like 80s music, and then it became 80s and more, and then 80s, 90s now, and then they like got rid of the 80s when they wasn't great enough, with the ratings or whatever. But yeah, so I mean, I do like a decent amount of 80s rock mostly at this point now, though.
Okay. Yeah, I like 80s pop and alternative. Like when I in the 90s when there was Columbia House and BMG where you could get the 8 or 12 CDs for a penny or something. I basically bought all of the greatest hits of the 80s bands like Tears for Fears and The Cars and Simple Minds. I collected all that stuff and got really into it. And then in the MP3 era in the later 90s, I would find all those one-hit wonders from the 80s that I loved so much as a kid. And again, nostalgia, man, it's very powerful. And so I still have some of those MP3s on my computer actually that I collected all those years ago, along with my Something Corporate stuff. There are things like Spandau Ballet and Duran Duran and things like that. So
yeah,
big 80s music fan. Now, I could probably take all day and go through every single one of these references, so jump in anywhere if you want to jump around.
So one that I wasn't, didn't really know the history of, it's Ronald Reagan fought Star Wars, but it'll never be Han Solo. And so I'm like, okay, what's that reference? Because I don't understand. And so I looked it up. There was this SDI program, which was like a space-based missile defense program that was there to protect the U.S. from large-scale nuclear attack. But it was as far out as Star Wars, like as unrealistic as Star Wars, a lot of people felt. So that's why it's compared to, it was nicknamed Star Wars. But I knew nothing about that though. So
yeah, I didn't know anything about that either. And I guess I'm not surprised with myself. Like as young as I wasn't aware of what was going on in the news. So how would we know that? And Something Corporate and Andrew, in general, doesn't reference historical events, political figures too much. And I think there's a Jack's Mannequin song that references George W. Bush. But this is not common in his music. So going back to my earlier comment, it almost fits in with that idea. And I think that's what also gave me the idea. Maybe this is their kind of punk song because he's referencing political figures and historical events and historical tragedies that we'll get to in a moment that he didn't do anywhere else really. So he was just kind of pulling things out of the air, but maybe things that stuck out to him when he was, when he was looking back on his childhood, things that he caught on the news. For some, for a certain generation, obviously that would be 9/11 or, the Columbine shooting in 1999, or, much later, for a really young generation, like the recent couple presidential elections. So, years from now, the events of today will probably some of them will make their way into music eventually.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. He doesn't go this direction a lot.
No.
You mentioned kind of historical things. I mean, we watched the wall fall down, of course, in
Yeah.
Berlin, but I don't remember, watching any of that.
I only knew of that more as a historical event in the 90s. So did you guys have Channel 1 when you were growing up? Or
Yeah, I don't know.
it was like a 15-minute news program that they would broadcast in schools, I think for free.
I'm familiar with that. Like they talk to the NASA, like the astronauts in space and stuff on that, right? Like,
Yeah. I remember them doing a news report in the mid 90s when I was in high school, and about, when the wall fell. I don't remember what they were talking about, but that's the memory I have of that. So it was definitely long after the actual event. I don't remember the event when it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a little bit of context of what it meant in the scheme of things, in relation to communism. And the symbol of the wall falling was freedom for people who lived there. So I know a little bit, but not a whole lot about that. So another historical event that's referenced is Tiananmen Square, which I referenced historical tragedies. I didn't know about this. I had to read about this one. Like you with the Ronald Reagan Star Wars thing. I'd heard of the event. I've heard it referenced.
Yeah.
I feel like I should know this.
There's a Flogging Molly song, I think Devil's Dance Floor, if I remember correctly, that references Tiananmen Square. But
okay.
Again, I don't know. History was never my strong subject, and and especially if this is like a moment in time of like babies of the '80s, like this is what you grew up with. I didn't grow up with this stuff in the '80s, and I still didn't get it, a lot of it along the way. So
I do attribute some of that to the fact that, and I used to be a history teacher, by the way. So before I am where I am now, I was a school counselor, and then I was a history teacher prior to that. But I taught American history from the Revolutionary era through just after the Civil War. And now in high school, at least in the states that I've worked in and lived in, they do have the modern era. The modern era never gets to the 80s, though, by the way. So maybe now it's different. We're a little further ahead. We're into 2024 now. But when I was in school, and even when I was teaching 10 years ago, they weren't teaching about the 1980s. They'd get to like the 60s, maybe the early 70s with Vietnam. And that's where it would end. That's where history would end. I never took like a modern politics type of course in high school or even college. Yeah, so some of this stuff we missed. But it seems like he's referencing these things as in he kind of either witnessed something on TV or something his family even talked about. He said in the lyrics, he says, students marched Tiananmen Square. They took him out. That's not fair. Dad said it's good to be free as we watched from our TV. So I don't know if that's like a literal interpretation of his memory or if it just made a good rhyme. I'm not sure. I would bet that it kind of came up in his family. But yeah, that next verse talks about the Berlin Wall falling down. But Bozo the Clown, I don't have much of a memory with Bozo the Clown.
I don't either. It's another one. That's why Unbelievable kind of resonates more. Is like I'm familiar with the term Bozo the Clown, but I don't know that.
Right, as a pop culture reference, right? Just like something goofy.
Yeah, exactly. And so I looked up Bozo the Clown, and on the Wikipedia page it says David Arquette bought the rights to Bozo the Clown 3 years ago. And
what's he going to do with that?
I don't know. It's a sequel to Eight-Legged Freaks or something, maybe?
Yeah, right. His next big role.
Yeah, I know. He's like, this is what's going to do it.
Yeah.
Bozo the Clown. I don't know.
I remember seeing it kind of, I feel like when I was at a babysitter when I was young, it was like on in the background. I have this visual of it being on someone's TV that I don't recognize in my memory. You know how you have these images of your childhood and you don't know like where they're from but you remember seeing it somehow?
Yeah.
That's the memory I have of Bozo the Clown, just it being on someone's TV.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
So MTV, I was curious about what kind of shows were on MTV in the 80s because I probably didn't watch a whole lot of MTV in the 80s. It was probably more early 90s I started in on MTV. But I did find out that in the 1980s, 120 Minutes, Headbangers Ball, Yo MTV Raps, and Club MTV all premiered in like the second half of the 1980s.
And I didn't watch those either, but like 120 Minutes actually, I didn't grow up on that or anything, but I interviewed Matt Pinfield, who was the host of 120 Minutes a couple years ago.
Yeah, I know who Matt Pinfield is, yeah.
He has so many stories. He was a great interview.
He met all the musicians. He knew them all.
Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
Like those guys, a lot of those guys are friends with Matt Pinfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. You said you've got an episode with him?
Yep.
Oh, I got to check that one out. I'd be really interested to hear that one. Yeah, I never got into Headbangers Ball or 120 Minutes, mostly because I was too young for it and it was on really late. So again, it was more one of those things I heard about kind of after the fact, and I saw some reruns or like some clips of it years later. Yeah, supposedly the golden age of MTV is what pop culture references refer to that. He talked about Nick at Night. I sort of remember Nick at Night, but like I remember my mom watching it.
I looked up Nick at Night too because I was like, okay, I feel like it was a part of my youth, but I'm like, what shows are on Nick at Night? And everything has been on Nick at Night at some point, even shows that were not new, but like came back to Nick at Night. I don't know. It's like this resting place for old shows that you watched before, and that's probably the closest I got. I mean, one of the ones is the Wonder Years. I was a big fan of the Wonder Years. Back in well, that was in high school. I mean, early like ninth grade or something. And so that wasn't in the 80s, but. You're right. I don't remember, so I probably didn't watch Nick at Night in the 80s. So a lot of these references I'm not connecting with.
I remember the only show I remember catching when my mom was watching it was Mr. Ed, which is about a talking horse. That was a really old show. But I found the same thing you did when I looked up, okay, what else was on Nick at Night? And I found I probably saw episodes, I'm looking at my notes here, I probably saw episodes of Dennis the Menace and Patty Duke. But I saw what you saw in that. Yeah, but eventually everything went to Nick at Night. Even Friends was at some point, if not now, on Nick at Night, which that doesn't feel like what I thought Nick at Night was.
No, I thought like Are You Afraid of the Dark and all that and everything, but that was, I guess, Nick at Night is later than like prime time.
Yeah, it was like 10, 11 o'clock at night. My mom's always stayed up and watched shows late at night. Nowadays she watches Seinfeld reruns. Like if we're over their house. That's what she'll be watching late at night, and sometimes I'll watch that with her, but not on Nick at Night. I didn't know what was on Nick at Night anymore. I just thought it was like those black and white TV shows from way back. That was always my perception of it. Do you know what jelly shoes are?
Vaguely, and I think my sister probably had them. I mean, because I think they're probably like what today would be Crocs, but not.
Ooh, that's a good description.
Is that a fair comparison? Like, I mean, yeah,
that's better than I could have come up with because I could not think of how I would describe them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, they're just little plastic cheapo shoes, I think, and the girls would wear young girls, I think.
Kids, yeah. I didn't know how to describe them, but I think Crocs is a good comparison. But they were like the straps were thinner and they kind of looked see-through, right? Like the material was like see-through and it had like sparkles in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I remember too. And then the last one I have on my list here is Ferris Bueller. And
Ferris Bueller, okay, that's timeless.
I'm a huge Ferris Bueller. I was a huge Ferris Bueller fan back in the day, and I'd still consider myself. That's one of those the movies from my childhood that I'm like, yeah, that was the stuff right there.
I don't know if I saw it when it came out. I don't remember when I latched onto it, but I mean, it's one that holds up absolutely. And a couple of years ago, I went to Chicago and up to I think it was the Sears Tower, and did the Ferris Bueller lean up there and everything. So
I forgot about that. Actually, that's a good reference. I don't know that I saw Ferris Bueller when it first came out, but I remember watching it on TV as it was just on. And we probably had it recorded on a VHS tape at some point, so my brother and I could rewatch it. Honestly, probably another example, like many of movies I probably shouldn't have been watching when I was a really little kid, but I don't know if there was anything too inappropriate in there, but I love that movie. There's so many good quotes. I've got one here. The question isn't what are we going to do? The question is what aren't we going to do?
Yes.
And then I will always think of the Beatles' Twist and Shout. I will always think of that movie when I hear that song. It's to me, that's not a Beatles song. It's a Ferris Bueller song.
That's it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good call out for that too. And I was watching this Ferris Bueller clip the other day, actually, like a flashback thing of some sort on YouTube, and
Uh-huh.
it was written in just like 2 days or something. And I don't think there were rewrites, and and it was long. And the director of Ferris Bueller, I forget who it is, but he overshoots, and they had to cut down the movie rather than cut down the script. They cut down like the movie. So and the cool thing about Ferris Bueller also is like it's just encompasses a day. So the piece is just like it was all out of order and kind of could land wherever really,
Hmm.
right? So it was a totally different type of movie because it didn't like sequentially go from this to this
Uh-huh.
necessarily. Okay, he goes to a baseball game, they go to Sears Tower, they go to this place, and in the parade, but none of it matters when those actually happen in the necessarily in the playing out of the movie, right?
Yeah, I think it was for a lot of us watching that as kids. It was like, oh man, I want to do that when I get older. I want to skip school and go to the ball game and go
Yeah.
crash a parade and just do whatever I want for this. Steal my friend's dad's really cool car and cruise around the city in his convertible. Yeah, it was kind of like that dream, that fantasy. Getting back to music with the Ferris Bueller references, there are two bands that I like a lot. Their names came from Ferris Bueller references.
Say Ferris. Yeah, I've interviewed them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still a fan. They're actually touring. I won't be able to see them, but they're actually in my area this weekend. Friday in Detroit and Saturday in Columbus. I won't be able to make it though, but I would love to because I have seen them a couple of times. The other one is maybe a little bit more obscure, but the principal's name in Ferris Bueller was Rooney. Ed Rooney.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually
Yeah.
forgot until I was, looking at the Wikipedia page for Ferris Bueller recently. And I was like, Rooney. Oh, yes, the band Rooney from the early 2000s. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't have connected them as with Ferris Bueller, but yeah,
Yeah.
I get it now.
Fairly certain I read that somewhere. And hey, I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that that is the reference for the band name. Yeah, there's just so much jam packed as we kind of just demonstrated into this song, all these different references, and we didn't even cover them all. Was there anything else in the song that we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, I think we hit most of them, and I think we agree that as guys that are around Andrew's age, that some of these references as kids were not we're not too familiar,
Yeah.
to connecting with, but but a little bit later on, maybe you kind of grow some realization to it. The unbelievable song, I'm like that. Yep, that was my child. That was my child. That was my childhood sort of thing. So.
It kind of makes me wonder if now, looking back to the 80s, if I was a songwriter, which I am not, but if I was, what kind of things I would reference from my childhood. It's kind of a funny thing to think about. It's like, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Some of them are more newsworthy, but most of them are probably more along the toys that I played with, and Toys R Us would definitely make the list. I know that one.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because that was a core memory there. Do you have a favorite part of the song or favorite thing about the song?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I mean the lyrics are just so simple. It's not like there's anything deep. Like this one really calls out to me.
Yeah.
MTV and Nick at Night. Maybe I don't like would be like it's not a great answer, but
Well, even if it's just a part, like I love the piano solo.
yeah, yes,
I think that's pretty exciting to hear Andrew play that way because it's so different from what I've heard from him. So
I like the idea of it. I think more than any particular lyric, it just
yeah,
kind of connects that back to hey, I was a baby of the '80s too, even though none of the lyrics that you're about to sing are
or maybe
directly.
relevant to
I
me,
like
but
the song and it yeah and play it. Okay, come on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Five Alive, I may not know, but I drank a ton of Sunny D growing up. So if it's anything
Yeah.
comparable, so Sunny D would probably be on my list.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm glad you told me what Five Alive is. Now I'm kind of curious to learn more about what the heck that is.
Don't have it. Your insides will probably be burning. I'm sure.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
there's a reason it was
yeah,
discontinued, right?
yeah, I know.
We already kind of covered the two different versions, and I think we agree there's really not much of a difference. I was surprised to hear you say that one was 20 seconds different than the other one because I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, just I mean, when I was looking at the times on YouTube, one was like just over 3 minutes, and one was 3:20 or something. So I don't know where
Okay.
that time change came from. If it was like the same version, because it felt very similar. But
Yeah, but we could call them both demos. They weren't, real high quality studio recordings. But I'll link them both in the show notes. I'll link both versions. People can make their own call on that. Like I said, I feel like it was just a tweaking of maybe the volume of certain instruments or his vocals at the time, sharpening the edges a little bit. So I think you answered this earlier. This is a song that you were kind of looking to hear at a concert, right? And you got to.
It was, and I was very excited to hear it. Yeah, but it's, I think, again, not because of any connection to the actual song itself, really, but because I want to hear the deep stuff. I want to hear the stuff that I heard many years ago, but never seen live. And I mean, because there's the ones that, okay, yeah, he's going to play that. You can't not play it. Constantine, you can't, at a Something Corporate show, really. And you can't, and there are ones that are staples. And so, I want to hear some stuff that I haven't heard, and that I want to challenge the members of Something Corporate to dig deep.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he's listening. Like you said, I look forward to hearing more in your interview with them about this, but like that whole, this is for the fans. You're an artist, but also he's always been the kind of artist that wants to be with the fans, that wants to please the fans, that wants to have fun with the fans.
Yeah.
And so obviously he wants people to have fun. So we're going to get the If You See Jordan, we're going to get Constantine. Sometimes we're going to get those deep cuts just to, kind of sprinkle in some extra surprise. And Babies of the 80s was a interesting choice, but I think it was a good choice for them to try out something really different on us. So
I agree.
I still haven't seen it live. Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I'm okay without seeing it live. I got to see the video. That was cool. There's some other deep cuts I would prefer if I got to pick, which I don't get to pick, but I'm fortunate to see Something Corporate a couple times this year, so I don't really care what they play at this point. Like I'm just looking forward to September and like living in it again, just like that feeling of seeing Something Corporate on stage again. So I'm good with whatever.
Yeah.
Is there any other things you wanted to talk about from the show up in Seattle, the actual concert?
It's a great set, and just to see them having so much fun together and kind of reliving this piece of their youth. It's it's not something that's going to be around for forever. I mean, Anders talked about next year being a Jack's Mannequin year for 20 years in transit, and looking forward to that. I mean, it's just, of course, we're fans. We'll be there, and through it all. So.
I agree with you. This Something Corporate thing's not going to last forever, and I'm good with that. It's fun to come back to it for a little bit, and I understand that these guys have moved on to other facets of each of their careers, different careers too. Some music, some not. And it's neat that we get to revisit, potentially Jack's Mannequin next year, and then it'll be neat the following year when we get probably more Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness added on. So it's a fun ride. It's neat that Andrew has these 3 different bands that he's in that make different music that a lot of us are fans of.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being on, Steve. I look forward to the full interview. I'll be checking that out on Concert Pipeline. You're the reason I'm a fan of the Rocket Summer. After we last talked, I listened to an episode of your podcast, and it was an interview with Bryce Avery. And now, I had a few friends recommend the Rocket Summer, and so I kind of knew what they were about, but I never listened to an album until January. And so I listened to several of his albums, and I loved it. And I loved it so much that I went to see him in concert in March, and that made me fall even more in love with the artist and his music. So thank you for that. I also want to shout out another episode I listened to around the same time, and that I gained a whole new respect for the band Smash Mouth. I know we actually kind of referenced them on the last time we talked as someone you were into when you were younger. But it was really cool to hear an interview with the original lead singer, rest in peace, Steve Harwell. But then
the Steve Harwell one was like 2017.
You did an update with the new lead singer.
Yeah, exactly. I had the new lead singer Zach Goody on a couple years back. It was like early COVID, I think. So a couple years ago. And so I put them both together in a more recent episode when Steve Harwell passed, to kind of pay tribute. Yeah, it's something I kind of took from Mark Maron. He does on his podcast when guests that he's had on die. I haven't had that many guests that I've interviewed died, but I try and do that as well. Is kind of go back and pull those out and kind of say a little something about that person and what it means to me. And so Smash Mouth I did grow up on, and Steve Harwell was part of my youth, and
absolutely
and the new singer taking the reins. I mean, he was just super fresh with the band, and it was great to get to talk to him and just fanboy about the legacy that he's taking over.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are hesitant to listen to a band they knew the lead singer, and the lead singer leaves or passes or whatever, and they get a new lead singer, and it's hard for a lot of people to make that adjustment. But your interview with Zach made me want to give them another listen, a more modern listen, and made me want to see them in concert and see him perform, because I got to hear some of that, singing those songs, and it was pretty cool. So thank you for that. I appreciate what you do with that.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks everybody else for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Again, can't thank you enough, Steve, for bringing the audio from your interview, letting us use a little bit of that, and looking forward to hearing the whole thing. It sounds like we can find the podcast on YouTube and Apple and Spotify and probably all the places, right?
Probably. There's probably other places. Those are the main ones, though. I would start
Yeah.
there. I'm going to recommend YouTube on this one because of the level of effort that I put in with the editing.
I'll definitely give it a view. I'll definitely watch it. Thanks again for everyone listening. You can chat me on Instagram, email me at somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com if you like. And I hope to see many of you in Cleveland and Detroit, and some of you even on the cruise in November. This may be something after all. Who knew this would be something